Let's see here. Hit you on the mute button.
Oh, there we go.
Can you say, are you there? Can you hear me okay, Phoebe?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm excited. Oh, no.
There we go. We're good now.
Okay, great. Hi.
How's it going today?
To be here. Sorry?
I said, how's it going today?
It is a beautiful day. Things are going pretty well. How about you?
Can't complain. We're rocking and rolling along and getting to spend the day with 24 amazing people. Always makes it easy for me.
Totally. I popped on for Christie's, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, it was good stuff there. Guys and gals, if you don't know who our next guest is here, she's an amazing podcaster. She's the founder of Unbecoming. It's a leading podcast and nationally syndicated radio show that interviews the most interesting, influential, and intelligent people. Definitely, I take that is it to a T on the Unbecoming. She helps over 100,000 people a week. Weekly listeners that most commonly identify as former successes readily shifted to a more honest and fulfilling future. She's offering some cool choose-your-own adventures in the form of transformational courses, communities, and both at home and in-person retreats. And so she's a world traveler with so many great stories and so many insight. But what I love most about what Phoebe says is she believes in the fact that we're meant to do a whole lot more than just work. And so we're honored to have you here. Somebody who's traveled over 70 countries, been cage diving, motorcycled across 15 countries, and just absolutely lived life to its fullest. So honored to have you here, Phoebe. How's it going?
It's going great. I know that you always love the travel piece, so I always put that in there because that's something that I think you and I have talked about extensively.
Oh, yeah, definitely, in a variety of things. Steph and I were like, let's finish. Let them open the borders so we can go travel, get the heck out of Dodge for a little while, in a variety of things. But with so many things going on and so much creativity out there in the market, people really having a force to pivot. I know you're probably talking to a lot of entrepreneurs that may be going through a little bit of a panic shock here over the last 90 days, trying to figure out how to get their message out, how to change how their message is delivered. And you do such an amazing job. And I've seen your podcast kind of evolve over the last couple of years a little bit too. Some of the new marketing and stuff that you're doing. So, what's your best advice for those that are kind of struggling right now and not knowing where to go with their message?
So, Scott, I think you know me well enough to know that I always come with a plan. So yep. I have notes. I am ready to go to share a little bit of my insight. I don't have slides or anything because I thought it was just easier if I just talk it out. But if there's something that you hear, Scott, or anybody else, I'm sure you'll field questions. But, stop me because I want to just make the next 27 minutes just as valuable. Well, however long, I'll stay on all day. Or you can kick me off when you need to. But for me, as you said, there's so many people that are needing to pivot or shift, and that's a lot of what I have a lot of really great experience in. I've done a lot of pivoting and a lot of shifting. And so just to kind of start off with a couple basics, and as far as a presentation, stop me if you have questions or if you want to make it more engaging if I'm not as engaging. Okay. So the first thing that I think is so important as far as efficiency, I love efficiency. I find when businesses are inefficient, it just wastes time and resources. So the first thing, just as far as getting things in order, and this definitely relates to social media, is just to spend the time and spend the money on creating valuable resources or templates for yourself or your team. Really important, using them for both production and promotion. I think for me personally, that has been something that just helps so much in the way that I kind of standardize things. So you leave room for creativity, but you also standardize things. So 2 tools, I know that somebody earlier spoke on Canva, and I think that is just such a great tool. So creating graphics and I know I heard you talking a little bit about labeling things and just keeping it organized, right? The things that you value the most, you are the most organized in. So if you value your business and you value your clients, then staying really organized will help you. In Canva, the other thing is Suite Process that I use for documenting documenting, delegating, outsourcing. So anything that is not in your A, highest value, or B, biggest strength, make sure that you are giving that to somebody who would appreciate the money. I heard this past weekend that delegating should never cost you money. I thought that was such a really valuable phrase to think about, the way that you grow a team or not. If you're a solopreneur, I get it. If you have a team, I understand that as well. So that's kind of the first part that I wanted to talk about. But the real stuff that I think that I could help somebody who is in a pivot, in a transition, or maybe just trying to scale a little bit better, there is one skill that I think every entrepreneur, every business owner needs to know, and that is the gift of copywriting or storytelling. And that is something that I would say I get the most amount of feedback on, as far as my promotion is in my storytelling. And that's something I love, a good story. I'm a writer first, a speaker second. So I feel like I also talk really fast, so you can imagine what my writing is like always. So as far as, here's kind of the process. So I thought through earlier, like, what is it about my process that I think people could gain some insight into and figure out where they might be missing a step. So it's not that I think I'm a good writer, but I think it's more the way that I lay it out and the way I plan it out to make it that way. So you don't have to be super gifted in actual writing to be a good copywriter. And so copywriting is one skill, storytelling is the next, but they overlap in a really cool way. So the first thing is just to consider, sorry, did you have something you were going to say?
I was just going to simply say that your recent series on your Facebook page of stories was well written, and you could see kind of the same kind of lineup a little bit. It's not only just, hey, just regurgitating a story. You brought in the emotion aspect of things. And I know you got a lot of comments and a lot of connections with your audience and your tribe from being able to share those things like that. Like the thing that was it the spider that was in the bed, or the scorpion?
I don't know, that's
in Africa.
But there's like a possum in Bali.
Yes, possum. That was it. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the possum pissed on you, wasn't it? Or yes.
Oh God. I mean, but I think the reason why I love storytelling so much is because it connects, and also it reminds you. So if you can go back in your life, like that story, I mean, I don't know many people that have have almost been defecated on by a possum, but I have, and it brings you back to that moment. And so many of my stories, it's like, juggling the highs and the lows, right? And so that's actually something that I didn't mention in here, but I think it's important, is to not always, to really gauge where your stories are going, right? So I would put that one next to the one where I'm talking about being in prison and having a really emotional experience with an inmate and our conversation. So it's like balancing out. So you're taking people on a high and low, and they don't know where they're going. So I am, as you read earlier, like, I'm just an adventurer. And I think taking people on an adventure is so important. So to like balance that out, but I love that of all the stories, that's the one you remember. It's so great.
Well, there's other ones that all of them were great. I mean, it was a great read. It was something, because you talked about, you hit each point, but you also taught the lesson, kind of your lesson learned from each one, which is valuable. It wasn't just a story that went on and on and on with no conclusion. You had, okay, here's this, and here's what I learned, and I didn't go to sleep the rest of the night, that kind of stuff, or the emotional connection with the inmate. You talked about that in the story, and the emotion and the tears and stuff like that. That adds so much to it, but it's a part of, kind of, before I interrupted you with the possum story, it's your game plan for putting a story or your copywriting place together, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we want to see somebody else's humanity, right? Which is, I think, a big part of storytelling is, if you don't feel naked in front of your audience, you're not doing it right? You should just pour your heart into it. And as I'm writing my stories, I'm crying, I'm laughing hysterically, like I'm in it, and that is, I'm in the zone. And so really the first thing when you're talking about whether you're sharing stories for business reason, and in my opinion, business and personal are like this, so it doesn't actually matter, but it's what is, getting really clear on what is the problem you're solving, what's the benefit, what's the information or the viewpoint that you can provide, that you're uniquely qualified or uniquely gifted at, and understanding what that is a whole, that could be 4 hours, 3 days in itself, just to really figure that out. And I know, Scott, you're so good at this, is like really figuring out an angle, or, knowing clearly what you stand for and what you provide, and then going and looking at all the other viewpoints in terms of what story, but I think it starts with, what do you want to solve? What viewpoint? If you're just talking about how Austin is a great city, yeah, well, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to agree with you. Like the sky is blue. Everyone's going to agree with you. But when it feels polarizing, that somebody could be like, I don't agree with that. That's when you're going to get this like needed friction, right? You need that contrast to like keep it interesting. So if you're just sharing something that everybody could agree with, it doesn't make for a good story, right? Or it doesn't make for a great business, basically. But under the guise of storytelling. So just knowing what the problem is. So start there, right? We're going to reverse engineer everything. And then the second one is what is the action or outcome that you're wanting them to take that's going to move them, get them a little bit closer to the benefit that they want. So if they want to travel the world, or they want to build a successful business, or they want to lose a couple pounds, or they want to, attract a mate, whatever it is, but what is that actual outcome? So knowing the problem, but knowing the benefit. And what is it that you want to bring them, how are you going to bring them closer to that? So then, I know, Scott, you've heard me say this question a lot, but this is like what so much of what I do hinges on. And that is, what does somebody need to know, understand, or believe to be true before they either sign up with you, before they engage with you further? Like, what is that? And going through that again could be another like multi-hour thing, but getting really clear about what is it that they need to know. Sometimes, in my experience, or for my business, it's sometimes they need to know that they're actually suffering as much as they are, because people aren't willing to admit to themselves, or they don't know what's possible outside of that. So sometimes it's, hey, you just need to know that there's another way to do this. A lot of people think that there's one way to do business, or there's one way to do life. And maybe it's just exposing them to a new viewpoint, a new vantage point for how they can live their life. So there's so many directions to go in that, but just to answer, what does this person need to know, understand, or believe to be true before they download my freebie, before they buy my retreats, or whatever that is for your business? And then, so that's the third one. How are we doing?
We're doing good. We're doing awesome on that. When you talking, I think about how people are struggling, and sometimes us as entrepreneurs, whether we've had ups or downs, we're struggling with people all along the same path. We have good days and bad days, and a lot of people don't want to share what's going on the negative side, that undercurrent. You've done a tremendous job sharing what you went through in the last 6 months, or I don't know how long ago that you were in the accident here in Austin. What a great way to come to Austin and get hit by a car. You know what I mean?
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. But instant impact. You know what I mean? But that's you shared that, hey, I'm dealing with headaches, or I'm working out, and I don't have the strength, and I'm kind of a step back. You really shared a lot of that, and I think your audience really appreciated that. Okay, yeah, Phoebe was having a bad day and struggling, and I think that struggle, people need to see us struggling with things, because that identifies a little bit more versus a robot that's always got a smile on his or her face, huh?
Totally. And I think this leads really well into kind of the next point, which is, how can you convey this, right? What do you need to know, understand, or believe to be true, in a way that they can understand or identify with? And so one of the things that I've been really clear on is, you need to pick a role. You need to pick a voice. And so when you're saying that, I get hit by a car, if I had been this like all high and mighty, nothing bothers me, and bam, that would have been really destructive to my brand, right? But my role, the way that I see my brand is, I'm not here to be your guru. I am not here to be your teacher even. I'm here to be kind of like your girlfriend, right? Like, and girl, that's a friend. And in a lot of terms, I work with a lot of women. And so it's like, I'm here to be your girlfriend. I'm here to be your friend. That's like, hey, real shit happens and we've got to deal with that. And so when I got hit by the car, which is a great example, I was never like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. It's like, because we all know that that's wrong, even though I stood up and I said, I know this is a gift and I don't know why. This is a gift and I don't know why. And that I kept repeating that to myself. But if people didn't see, I cried on social media, like that's not something that I do all the time, but it's because I feel so connected to people that are reading and listening to what I'm going through. And the podcast continued. I took 2 weeks off and then I continued on with the podcast because I thought it was important, even though I couldn't remember what I was saying. And as it's coming out of my mouth, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's important. And so I like to bring people along for the ride. And I think I used to say that make sure you're about 70% of the way through, because I've had clients many years ago that would get on when Periscope was a thing and would just like bawl their eyes out on Periscope and talk about how terrible life is and all. And you're like, well, and now you're going to ask them to buy your stuff. It's not congruent, right? So making sure that you are this 70%. And in my case, I was probably more 50%. I was in it, right? But I also was in it and I wasn't selling a program in how to have an amazing life, right? I'm like, no, this is life. This is what I'm going through. And I think that it strengthened my relationship, my connection, and my podcast downloads went up when I was in it. And that was just a really big indicator. So picking that role, picking that voice, who are you? And it's okay if you want to be the teacher and you want to be the guru, like that's okay. But just as long as it's clear that you're on their team, right? Speaking to somebody on their level. And I see a lot of people speaking down to people. And while that can be appropriate in some situations, if you are a specific expert in something, but people want to know that, you've got to knock yourself down a couple pegs in order to have them see you at a certain level. Because that means if you're on the pedestal, they're in the shit, right? Like they're not as good as you. And nobody wants to be talked down to. So I speak a lot about like business. I'm really good in business. I know my stuff. But like in relationships, I'm single. So I'll kind of harp on that a little bit to make sure that we kind of balance the scales a little bit, because I deal with a lot of married, all my clients in the past have all been married pretty much. So I think it's important to knock yourself down a little bit. Self-deprecating humor is great, but also it can be in a way that feels comfortable for you, just so they know that you're human, right? It's like bringing back that human element to it. And when it comes to writing, something that I do a lot, and I had a good friend of mine tell me this a couple years ago, and it was, how do you, or read back through all of your stuff and replace all of the yous with I's. So the moment you're like, you need to do this, this is going to benefit you and you have to, it's like, no, this was my experience. Replace it all with I's. And I think that will change your writing, change your storytelling entirely, because people don't want to be told what to do. They want to experience it alongside of you. And then, let them see themselves in your story. So something I say a lot is, you might not identify with the details of my story, but what you are going to identify with are the actual like core emotions of how I felt. Everybody has felt heartbroken. Everybody has felt this elation when shit is going right? So it's all of these emotions that we can relate and we can connect at on the core levels. And then as it relates to the actual like practical stuff about how to tell a good story, my biggest piece of advice is to drop them in the middle of the story. And I have been told that my storytelling or my writing is really compelling. And that's because I don't start off with, well, it was a beautiful sunny day, 95 degrees and blah, blah, it's no. Now I'm like, there are tears coming down my face, or I wake up to a smell. Like that was the one that the story, the possum one was, I woke up to a smell. And so you're in the story and you're like, what is going on? Where is she? What's happening? And that's like any good movie, right? Any good script writer is going to drop you in the middle. Then they go back, they set the scene, they tell you what's happening, and then they move you forward. So remember that the best stories start when you don't know, like with those captivating, compelling stories. I love to start with a quote, like somebody said something and you're like, it's a little bit jarring, it was unexpected, and you feel like, well, now what happens? And every line, the only goal of every line is to get them to the next line. That is like, as far as copywriting and for email marketing series and stuff, it's like, just get them, subject line, get them to open the email. Next line, get them to read to the second one. And I literally go back through any of like my big, especially in like funnel copy and email copy, it's, how do I get them to continue to engage? And I'll open loops, I'll be like, oh, more on that in the PS. So they're like, oh, okay. And your brain is like, well, I'm interested. And then it keeps them reading along with you. So the other thing is leave them to draw their own conclusions. I get this a lot when I read other people's writing, and it's like, oh, it was 100 degrees in Austin. It's so hot. Well, okay. So, we all know that don't tell them, show them. So don't tell them that it was so hot. It's like there were beads of sweat. I talk about it's sweaty and hot outside. It's like, talk about how you're sweating versus telling them what the temperature was, right? Like drop them in the story and then paint the picture, right? Like don't tell them that, I don't know, I was drinking this freezing cold water. It's like, no, the water touched the back of my throat and I could feel it all the way down, something like that, just as an example. And then in the like wrap up of the story, tell them what you told them, right? Like recap what happened. This is more in like a business context, but tell them what you already told them. People want to they want to understand, especially if it's a long post, they've been reading this whole thing. Tell them why they've been reading this whole thing. Remind them why they started, and obviously a call to action. And I see a lot of people that do, Scott, I'm sure you see this as well, but people are like, oh, just go to my website, and they drop them in the middle. Again, it's like, now I don't know where to go, versus, hey, go to this specific episode. I always say, if you're going to recommend a show of mine, if you're going to share it with somebody, share one episode and tell them why you shared it, right? Give them a little bit of context for why they're here, and don't just drop them on my homepage, because that's not helpful. And then just the, call to action, tell them what to do. Keep it really simple. Tell them to go to one place, tell them to do one thing, because we can't remember all. So if I want to ask you to review my show and then share it, and then I want you to go and look on Instagram and then go on Facebook, we're going to forget all of that. So we're simple creatures. Keep it simple. Keep it specific. And I think those are the ways that I tell good stories. So how is that? I feel like, I can't believe I am early.
Rod, you did rocking early. You're not done early. You do an amazing job with your Instagram marketing. I know we could go on over that stuff too, but are you doing that self, or you have a team that's handling a lot of the stuff, especially when you've got new episodes coming out and the branding and everything goes along with that?
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I asked a girlfriend of mine what she sees that I do in terms of social media that I should talk on today. And she was like, storytelling and your Instagram stories. And so thank you for bringing that up, because same thing relates to storytelling across the stories, right? Like I already, I don't just like get on there and blab. I know why I'm coming on. So I'll share something in advance of so for example, I had one come out today about feedback. And so I wanted to kind of paint the picture where people knew the context behind the feedback. I'll kind of drip it out. And then the day of, it's like, okay, now it's like the usual promotions. Here's how to get it. But it's give them a little bit of a taste or a little bit of context to why they should be listening, or who it's right for, who it's not right for. And so to answer your question, I have it all templated in terms of the standard promotional stuff, but I have an assistant who does that for me and then just sends it to me. So I'm actually posting it, but I don't have to go in and like change every little thing, but it's pretty standard. If you look at it every week, it's like pretty much the same, or I'll mix it up a little bit. I'll be like, oh, all right, it's kind of time for a change. if I have a guest on or whatever. And one thing I did want to say for people, I had a friend of mine ask me recently, what makes a great guest? And I thought that was a really good question. And, he was like, is it like sending the photos in advance and all? I'm like, yeah. But really, truly, to be a good guest, or to be, if you are engaging with somebody, share their stuff, right? Like, share the episode that goes out, like make them feel like you valued the time, right? And a lot of what I do is, if you're a guest on my show, I will send you in advance, 15 things, 15 different options. I have so many things, and Scott, I know you do this as well. It's like, I have so much stuff that you choose. Do you want to, how do you want to promote it on Instagram stories? How do you want to put it in your feed? How do you want to put it in your emails or your graphics on Facebook? Give people options. And also, I think the best marketing collateral has considered their brand and your brand. So I try to merge, like, I'll look at their branding, and most of the time it's me doing this, to like give some insight to my assistant, to be like, hey, okay, make sure that, we kind of, sometimes I'll like shrink my logo, but I want the photo to be good. And there's a really good quote, but it merges really well with their feed. So I just had a big guest on, and I say big being, he's a well-known person. And so I just had him, I created it so that it merged really beautifully with his feed. And now, of course, he's going to put it in there because it makes him look really good. And then, I just said, here are some things that you could say just to remind you about what we talked about. Not, here is, hello, really like canned responses. Nobody wants that. I want to let him put some his personality into it. But I'm like, here's some reminders about what we talked about, because he does interviews all the time, but I wanted mine to stand out. So start with the end in mind when it comes to, this is long-winded to say about Instagram stories, but start with the end in mind. Remember what you're talking about. Don't just blab on. And it always ties back to things that you care about. If you're in total alignment with who you are, what your brand stands for, who you are as an influencer or whatever, it shouldn't be hard to be able to tie that back. So just remember that there always should be something at the end that somebody's going to walk away with and be like, oh, that was interesting, entertaining, educational, inspiring, right? Everything should be tying back to that. And if you're doing it right, that shouldn't be that hard. But it takes a little bit of time to figure that out. I struggle with it myself sometimes. So yeah.
Good stuff. I love it. So definitely take the time to plot out your stories. I like to say pre-hook, like, oh, I cover that, like you said, I'll cover that in the PS, but bring the emotional aspect of it. You did a great job. You really defining your message and defining kind of your pathway to the success of there. We only got a couple minutes here, but any specific things that you like, oh, I just hate that about social media, whether it's something that you do or don't do, you're like, I'm just not going to deal with that aspect of it. Because I know you're not everywhere, because you're where your audience is at most of the time.
Yeah. Are you talking about like a platform or?
Yeah, whatever, something you heard people talk about, like, I just don't do that. I'm just choose not to.
I kind of want to, this is not great. I saw somebody talking about Pinterest on here. I'm not big on Pinterest, and I know I should be. I'm a very visual person. So that's a platform I haven't even, that's coming.
Me too.
Right. I'm gonna have to rewatch this and go back to whoever it was talking about Pinterest. But
you need to give. We're both friends with Kim Sutton, so you just need to give Kim a phone call. So
exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff there.
Can't be fun.
Phoebe, what's the best way for people to connect with you or get a hold of you or dive into more what you're the awesomeness you're doing online?
So I'm going to dump you right on my website. No, I'm kidding. Go to find me on Instagram. That is really the best way. I do some stuff on Facebook, but really, truly the best way to connect with me is on Instagram. All the links that you need are there, but that's where I share about my life, what I'm up to, all of my stories, everything. And I would just encourage you to go through it. If it resonates with you, send me a message. That is where I like to engage with people and get to know them a little bit better.
Good stuff. Favorite place you've eaten in Austin so far since they made the move here?
Suerte.
Say the what again? You broke up there a little bit. Ooh,
you know
yeah, that's good.
That place is delicious. But I'm also craving barbecue right now, so Terry Black's.
Terry Black's is good downtown. There you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Phoebe, thank you for being a part of National Social Media Day. Appreciate it so much. There's a bunch of us in Austin that have got to get together for a dinner at some point very soon. All righty.
Amen. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this today. You're just so great. I appreciate you.
Same here, Phoebe. We'll see you later. All righty. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.